Welcome to Ignite Intimacy, a podcast exploring intimacy, romantic relationships, sexuality, and everything that relates to these hot topics. We're going in. Are you ready? This is your host, Laura Aisha. Let's do this. Hello, Ignite Intimacy community. This is your host, Miss Laura Aisha, and wowzers, have we got an episode for you today. I am honored and thrilled and a little bit awestruck that we have Alison Armstrong on the line with us today. What's happening, Alison?
Well, I loved that you said episode. It made it sound like, wow, are we going to be drama or mystery or thriller, intrigue, soap opera? Like, we're an episode.
I think we're going to be a little bit of all of that.
I think so too.
So if you don't know about Alison Armstrong, she is the author of The Queen's Code, which is a book that was recommended to me by several people that I know and has been a huge force in shifting my perspective on communication and relating between men and women and my own emasculation of men and just, oh my goodness, so much juicy goodness in that book. So highly recommend The Queen's Code for men and women, right, Alison, wouldn't you say?
Oh yeah, it helps men understand what we're struggling with and has compassion for what they're struggling with. Yeah. So yes, definitely. Men love that book.
Yeah. So I'm curious what you think about this because on Ignite Intimacy, we certainly feature more women than men, and we certainly discuss more topics that I'd say focus on women. However, I always encourage men to listen if women are if they're into women, because even if they're not, but like men who are into women, I think it's a great education for them as well.
Yeah, we now encourage men to participate in our online Understanding Men course so they can understand why women struggle with them so much and why women emasculate them. And men have been threatening to dress up in drag to get into that workshop.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So I think, and vice versa, we encourage women to participate in our online A Hero's Challenge workshop, because if you see what men are struggling with in being a man, it can make all the difference in the world. So I, at some point, will have a new live curriculum that's co-ed from the very beginning, and also that blends more, because so much of what I see, especially in generations younger than mine, is that the male, female, man, woman, masculine, feminine, those boxes don't fit very well anymore. And we have a lot to learn from what have been typically gender conversations. We have a lot to learn about ourselves. And I hear all the time from people, well, it fit more for me what you said about men, or more what you said about women. And so until it gets expressed in another way, which I'm working on, there's a lot to learn from what's supposedly assigned to the other gender.
Absolutely. Well, I feel like it just gives us that snapshot into what the other person is experiencing. And that's some work that I'm doing a lot. I'm focusing a lot of energy on getting into other people's worlds.
You can never do too much of that. That's for darn sure.
So, Good job. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. It's not very comfortable all the time to acknowledge that, wow, I am really not in other people's worlds as much as I'd like to be. And to get that viewpoint for myself of where I'm trying to, like, how I'm trying to relate to others. And even just that I'm trying, right? So, like, what about just being? But, oh gosh, we have got a lot of really great topics to get into with you today. And so just to give our listeners a snapshot, we're going to be talking about the emasculation of men. We're going to be talking about the work that Alison does with both men and women. We'll talk about the difference between the male and the female in relating. And we're also going to talk about lovers and accountability and masculine versus feminine and money and relationships as it relates to all of the work that Alison's been doing for over 20 years. How does that sound?
That sounds like we better get busy.
Okay, cool. So if you're just joining us, we are here on the line with Alison Armstrong. And okay, so Alison, give us just kind of brief insight into how you got involved into this whole study of men and women and relating. What was the thing that was like, okay, this is my duty to humanity to start to unpack some of this?
Well, it helps me that you've read The Queen's Code, because in many ways that book, while fictional, is autobiographical. So what happened to Kimberly, where her friend was called a frog farmer, that happened to me. And the marriage that she described as having been in, pretty close to my first marriage, which I don't even think even qualifies as a marriage. And not because it didn't last very long, it was 7 years, but we just never took care of each other. So I had a lot of frustration and honestly got to the point where it was fair to say that I hated them. That sounds terrible, but it was true. I really had an enormous amount of disdain for men. I thought they were stupid. I never worried about hurting their feelings because they didn't have any. I questioned if they had a soul. I had such a low opinion of them. And it was reflected in the way that I interacted with them, except for you could say I was pretty snaky, right? So that, I could attract men and amuse men and even have men think they were in love with me. I could adapt and contort myself a lot to be appealing, the way that women have that way of doing it, but all the way while like, and boy, it's like my chest is getting really tight just thinking about it. And so when my friend expressed that men are great in the beginning and then they change, and the man she said it to, said, you're a frog farmer, right? Some women turn frogs into princes, you turn princes into frogs. It was a revelation for me. Like, oh my gosh, I could have something to do with this. I could be bringing out the worst in men. And a lot of women get upset when I, come right out and say that.
Mm-hmm. Who, me? What?
Exactly. Well,
I'm the victim here. Come on.
Exactly. But I got so excited because if I was doing something, I could change it. And I'd spent so much time trying to change men and failing that really I could focus on finding out how my behavior affected them. That was exciting to me. And the first empowerment really that I'd had about men in a very long time.
That's amazing. Well, and I think about the ways that I've demonized men. And here's what I'm discovering about life and humanity. We're all in it together, okay? We are all playing this game, whatever game we choose to play, right? And I have certainly felt victimized by men throughout my entire life. And I felt used, I felt cheated, I felt discarded. I mean, just the list goes on, right? So I certainly have my wounding as it relates to relationships and men and romance and sex and all of that. However, I'm the constant, right? So I'm the constant in my life and in all of my experiences. And it's difficult to say, like, what do you mean? How would I be responsible for creating that? Or I'm thinking of a dear friend who it's like there's so much focus on the man not having this or not being that. And then I just think to myself, gosh, I wonder how she sees herself in this mix, because sometimes we think the other person's the absolute culprit, and then we realize that we were actually the one that was setting the stage for creating that environment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there's an interesting thing about our brains, which I've learned a lot about neuroscience in the last few years. And one point of view that really empowered me came from a woman named Anat Banyal. And she told me right out, Alison, you have to boss your brain around. And that was the first time that it really occurred to me that I am not my brain. I have a brain and it works for me. And our brains will literally show us what we want to see and not bother spending the energy on showing us what we don't want to see. And so if we don't want to see our part, if we don't want to see what we have to do with something not working, or if we don't want to see what we have to do with something working, we just want to live like in a fairy tale and I don't know how I got so lucky, our brain will literally conceal from us what we don't want to see and show us what we do want to see. And I got hungry for seeing the opportunities I had to choose to respond differently. Like, wake me up when I'm doing the same old thing and I could do something different. But you have to want it. And when your brain is showing you you're doing that thing that sabotages, you got to go, oh, thank you, brain. Instead of, oh, no, I'm such a terrible person.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, you don't want to see that.
Yeah, it's like, oh, this is information. I'm actually getting something from this. So, okay, so you were in what sounds like...
And that's why I like, sorry, well, just to finish, ladies, I just want everybody to know my work is never about blame. It's about what could I take responsibility for and therefore be empowered by. And you spoke about, learning how to get into other people's world more. You were talking about that at the beginning, Laura.
Mm-hmm.
Honestly, the Queen's Code it's a lot about getting into our own world, right? Understanding ourselves. If we don't understand why we're compelled to do what we do, we're never going to end up with alternatives.
Yeah, and that's the key, because we are the consistent in our life and in our reality, and there's so much charge around romance and sex and relationships between men and women. So you began this deep dive into discovering who am I in my relationships with men, and what transpired through that?
Well, that evening when my friend Lisa was called a frog farmer, I really didn't commit to studying men I did. I thought it would take 2 or 3 months to learn anything that was worth knowing about them, because after all, they were soulless and shallow. But for some reason, I started with the question, what if men are responding to women? And that ended up being my salvation, because so much research is out to prove something, and which ties back into what I was just saying. Your brain will show you what you want to see. And I wasn't trying to prove that men were responding to women, and I wasn't trying to prove that men were not responding to women, and we had nothing to do with it. It was just, what if? Mm-hmm. And yeah, and so I was a business coach to 3 men at the time as a side job for the nonprofit that I ran. And every time they did something that surprised me, I tried to figure out why. And then when I thought I knew why, I would ask them if that was why. And that was when my education began, because I was wrong. My explanation for why they did that thing was wrong in the beginning. It was always wrong, and not a little wrong. Wrong, like one man was practically grossed out. He said, I would never do anything for that reason, and no self-respecting man would.
Interesting.
Yeah, and I had asked him if he had kept a commitment with his mom to do something he really didn't want to do because he didn't want to upset her. And that's what he found to be gross. And I'm like, so why did he keep that commitment? He's like, because of who I am, because of my duty as a son. It didn't matter whether I wanted to or not. It was a matter of honor. And man, my brains were on the walls that day. I was just like, what the heck? Yeah, and then the time I asked one of my clients if he could be anything for a man, what would it for a woman, what would it be? If you could be anything for a woman you loved, what would it be? And his answer was a hero.
Wow.
And then I was like, I thought he was kidding, right? And then he kept talking about, yeah, for a woman I loved, and then for all the women I love, and then finally, with this little chagrin in his voice, he said, okay, if I was to tell the truth, if I could be the hero of every woman I met every day, that would be Nirvana.
Whoa.
Exactly. I'm like, what the heck? So then I checked with the other two about, so do you want to be a hero? One of them said it's one of the best things about team sports, that you can be a hero for your teammates, and that he still wanted to be a hero for his ex-wife. Another man got all choked up and finally said, it's the only good thing about war.
Wow.
I mean, yeah, these were just these blow my mind. Who are these? Wait, did you not get the memo that you're soulless and shallow?
Well, and okay, so I noticed in, listening to a couple of your other interviews that I felt a little bit triggered about this because I am clear that it most likely has something to do with my own delivery and stuff still being in the space for me around men and asking men for help with things and that type of thing. However, I feel like I have certainly interacted with men who love to provide and, be a stand for women. I've also had many experiences that were the opposite of that, and almost being shamed for asking for help, or, oh, you just want men to do everything for you, and a kind of attitude in response, and just do it yourself kind of response, and not feeling that love, not feeling that desire from certain people to want to be the hero, to want to help out. So can we talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I certainly know what you're talking about. And there's several elements that go into it. Can I just unpack it?
Please.
Okay. So there's some that has to do with him, and there's some that has to do with us. And the part that has to do with us is, one, how are we relating to asking? So one of the things that people do that never goes well with anybody, male or female, is asking for something from entitlement. With, of course, you should do this for me. You owe me this, or I'm so important. Someone like you should be doing this for me. So any kind of entitlement, which all expectations have an entitlement in them, that's part of what makes it an expectation, is this is owed to me without me having to do anything else. I shouldn't have to spend any more energy. So any kind of entitlement is a real turnoff. And it's kind of like, where's my back rub, right? A moment before you actually wanted to rub their back. Now it's gone. So that's a huge part that everybody's got to watch out for. Another part is timing. And this is one of the biggest things that we have to teach men and women, because women tend to ask men for things when they're focused on something else. And focus is a state of commitment. And when we're asking them for something when they're committed to something else, it's an interruption. It can be disrespectful, like, hey, what you're doing is stupid. You should do this for me. It doesn't honor that they chose to do that. So a lot of asking men for what we need has to do with timing. It's one of the biggest things that we teach. Another thing besides expectation and timing is, and this is now bridging to the other side of what's on him, and that is, how does he relate to you? So if you are someone that he thinks of as belonging to him, like my sister, my mother, my friend, my neighbor, my employee, anything he would say with a my, he has a sense of that you belong to him and he belongs to you. And so his relationship to doing something for you is going to be more intimate, if you will, like the connection is stronger. And he can actually get really upset if you're asking him for something that he can't do, because his inability to provide for you occurs as a failure on his part. And the prickliness and defensiveness you can get from like your dad or brother or husband, where they say, well, what do you need that for? That's a defense against, I can't do it and you're torturing me. I'm right. Like, I consider that mine to provide and I can't. So it's really upsetting that you need that right now. Can you see how it's the opposite of what we think?
Yeah.
Yeah. They can get really prickly when they are unable to provide what we need, what we're asking for, and that they think they should do, and they can't. It's a kind of torture to a man.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Okay. So what's...
Is this starting to illuminate?
It is. And it's also just bringing to the surface that we as women tend to, and now we're not saying large generalizations about this, right? There are certainly the grand spectrum of human beings who think and act and show up in a multitude of different ways. I'll just say that as a woman, I consistently misinterpret what men say and how they show up. So,
that's so cool.
So in your work, the work that you've done and the study of men and women and masculine and feminine relating, what have you found are the differences in the ways that men and women show up? Because like sometimes I will, go on a date and think it was really great, and then I don't hear anything. Maybe not right away, or maybe not at all. And then I'm thinking like rejection, I'm unwanted, I'm not good enough. I can go into that train of thought. So can you talk us through some of that?
Okay, there was plenty to talk about before you brought up dating. Okay, so let's see if I can give all right, so a fundamental that causes misinterpretation is how much we as women don't understand the consciousness, the mentality, the relationship to oneself as a protector, as a warrior. And a lot of times, women have to be their own protectors and their own warriors, or they may be warriors for their children, and then you can tap into this. But fundamentally, what happens when you're in protect mode, your relationship to communication is one of concealment. So you basically, what it comes down to is you conceal everything and anything that is important. This is one of the reasons men get a reputation for being superficial and talking about superficial things, because when anything they say could or will be used against them, come back at them in any way, it's going to be concealed. So they'll conceal their strengths, they'll conceal their weaknesses. Under weaknesses would include anything they need, anything they're attached to, anything they care about. They conceal their plans. They conceal emotions that might be manipulated. You can tell when a man is really in concealment mode because he won't even tell you his opinion, because they know that their opinions reveal their values, and their opinions reveal their trusted sources of information.
Yes, and so, I just want to say that if you haven't read the Queen's Code, everyone out there listening, this is a very powerful part that Alison goes into in the Queen's Code about men and their opinions and how they relate to their values. It's just like this super juicy part of that book that you will love and get so much out of, I'm telling you.
Yeah, it's one of the most important things that I discovered about them, and not just about them, but that there's a way to listen to a man's opinions that has it go from, why are you pushing me away? Why do you think I'm stupid? Why are you telling me what to do? Which is a lot what women experience when a man's expressing his opinions, to turning it into a treasure hunt of, oh my gosh, you're showing me so much about you. This is super cool. And it's all in how we listen and and filter that information, and it's something we can affect, we can change. So the other thing, just to keep on the same track, so how he relates to you as in, do you belong to him, or in the dating world, in the dating part of life, how does he relate to you in terms of how does he experience his attraction to you? And one of the other 2 books I wrote is all about how a man's attraction to you will affect the way that he relates to you in all these different arenas. And so, for example, in the area of sex, because we promised we would talk about that.
Yes.
So one of the breakthroughs in my study was whenever a man talked about a woman, and I'd be like, so what's going on with you and her? And he'd say, oh, it's just physical. I'm just physically attracted to her. I thought when a man said he was physically attracted to a woman, I thought what he meant was that her body appealed to him, that he thought she had a great body. Well, talk about misinterpreting. When I finally was able to unravel it, I found out he was being literal, which they usually are. I'm just physically attracted to her. The only part of me that is attracted to her is just my body. I'm just physically attracted to her. My body is just attracted to her. Nothing else of me is attracted to her. My body is.
Interesting.
Yes. So what he's saying is I'm having an object to object reaction. The object I inhabit is attracted to the object that she inhabits, and my object wants to do her object.
And it's not emotional. It's like totally unemotional, right?
He's saying my emotions have not been invited to the party. My intellect has not been invited to the party. My spirit has not been invited to the party. There's no other part of who I am that is being touched, inspired, awakened, and compelled by that person. Which is why you can have, and this was one of the things I was wondering about when I started studying men, is why will the same man treat one woman like a barmaid, which is how I thought of it at the time, and another like a queen? The same guy. How could he be so different? And that's when I started to find out what triggers in men very primitive reactions and is going to have that object-to-object relationship, which, by the way, a man commenting on a woman's body like he's just stating whether or not it's pleasing or not, that's a sign of a man who's just physically attracted. And a man, and he will have sex. That man will have sex, and you will feel taken from, or it may feel transactional. You did this for me, I'll do that for you. It's like a transaction. It's when they experience mental and emotional and spiritual attraction, which is really, by the way, not comfortable for them. Physical attraction's easy. There's nothing at stake. There's no loss, right? Like you can't be hurt. And I remember I know a woman who met a man online, and when he met her in person, his reaction to himself, which we found out later, was, uh-oh, I could really care about her. Yeah, he knew he was in trouble. Like, uh-oh, I could really care about her. They're now engaged.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah, he chased her down like a freight train. Oh yeah, it's just adorable. But his emotional response to her, he already knew what she looked like. But then being in her presence, men are so perceptive, what they can tell just by looking at you, that what causes a man to be emotionally and mentally and spiritually involved can happen just by what he sees. So it's the opposite of superficial. They're super perceptive. And it's why men say they know. They're so funny. They've debated it in front of me. They've come down to, it's really within the first 30 seconds and at most within the first 3 minutes they know who a woman could be for them.
And so what I'm curious about are two things that are coming up for me. And I know Allison has a very busy schedule, so she has a hard stop. So we're going to do a lightning round. I have like 10 topics I want to talk with you about in 15 minutes. So,
Okay.
so I'm thinking about what might a woman be doing or not doing? Like, because I tend to get into my head about it and think, well, how am I showing up that men tend to see me more as like playful and fun than long-term relationship material? And that's the story I have around it because that's what I believe my experience has been. So can we just spend a minute diving into that?
This is a personal question, I see. I'm teasing you. So playful and fun is awesome. Most women could use some more playful and fun. What has playful and fun also occur like, wow, she could be really good for me, is him feeling nurtured, him feeling like he's being fed. And that would be like emotionally. So there's warmth, there's caring, there's looking out for it. Like even just on a first date, there are ways that you can show consideration for another person that has them just get it. Like, oh, I matter. But if you're playful and fun while doing it, the playful and fun could override it. So like, do you let yourself be just there for someone and like noticing, wow, you cleaned your plate. I can only eat half of my sandwich. Do you want it? Do you want my sandwich? Instead of, I'm going to get this packed up to go. Like, it seems like you're so hungry. Do you want my sandwich? That is like just at a very core level, like, you care if I'm hungry. And even if they don't take your sandwich, just that you cared, right?
Yeah.
Or if it's authentic, a woman offering, do you know you've taken me out the last 3 times? Can I treat? That appreciation that dating is expensive. Like, wow, she sees this more as a partnership. She's not just wanting to take from me.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so that leads me into a different question. So we'll loop around to the other question that I wanted to ask, but this kind of segues into an area, dating and relating with men and women. And I am, in heterosexual relationships, right? So that's the perspective that I come from. But please apply this to any type of relationship style or gender or non-gender that you are into. So with dating and money and treating and chivalry and giving and receiving in the 21st century. This kind of touches right on that because there are men, I believe, that just love to treat women. They have no desire to have the bill picked up for them. It might even be uncomfortable for them. But then there are men who would actually rather have a woman offer to treat. And there's something about that adds value. And there's this whole grand spectrum in between. What are you discovering in the 21st century, especially since you started doing this work in the 90s? Or even before, maybe?
Yeah, my high school reunion, they thought I started a lot earlier. Some guys are joking that I've been studying men all my life. Well, okay, so you're on the topic of money, right? Not just dating, but money?
Yes.
Okay, so everybody's got stuff about money, right? And abundance and fear and power. It's a mess, and it's a really important thing to unravel. And what I've noticed, and I've been on panels with people talking about, what about when she makes more? Men tend to have if we're together, it's our money. Cool. Wherever it comes from, the more we have, that's the more fun for both of us. They are not intimidated by a woman making more money than them unless he has an attitude towards it that it means that she should have more power, more of a say, like that it gives her rights having more money. There are plenty of men who they practically shiver when they think of a woman picking up the bill because their identity is I'm the provider. And there are men who feel, but even those men have said for a woman to offer is to them an indication she doesn't just want to take from me. And that's part of what you said that was really important, because the history of human interaction is of taking, right? It's of taking what we're entitled to, taking what we deserve. It's of trading. So there's get it, take it, provide it, trade for it. And giving and receiving is actually not instinctive. Giving and receiving, we would call an expression of human spirit. So it's a completely different way of being, that because when you're truly giving, all you need for that to have been satisfying is that they received it. Right? And when you're truly receiving, there's nothing present of what's this going to obligate me to. There's just the presence of the person who's wanting to contribute to you and how they're expressing that, and the exposure of letting them touch you that way. Giving and receiving is something I've been working on for, a couple of decades, of how does it work and how do you access it and what do you have to set aside and let go of? And it's a challenge for both men and women.
Yeah.
And this is one of the things that's interesting, though, about men in particular, which I try to never say these days a specific man-woman thing. But I notice in this area, men tend to have a stronger sense of what is theirs to provide, and they're gonna provide it whether it's appreciated or not, because it's theirs to give. And appreciation for it, admiration for it, that alters the quality of their life, the amount of energy they have, how great it is to be alive. But it doesn't affect whether or not they're going to provide that. It's like what I was saying about Brooke didn't help his set if he didn't. He helped his mom because his definition of a man is, as a son, I help my mom, whether I want to or not. If that makes any sense. So a woman's ability to receive from a man who, in his world, of course, I'm going to pick up the tab. He can feel used by some people, but he doesn't care. He's still going to pick up the tab. To feel appreciated for it, to feel received from, to experience the honor of that and the care in that changes his experience of it.
Yeah. Well, and, it's just interesting because I was out with a woman in Mexico, and we were just having a conversation about men and women, and I love being treated by men. And it could have something to do with growing up in a family where my father always paid for everything, and he would buy my mom beautiful things for her birthday and Christmas, like really special, thoughtful things. And with my father, it's like you're not even like allowed, like we have to sneak and give the waiter money or a credit card to pay for a bill if we want to pick up the tab, because he won't let anyone. So then I was a single mom for most of my daughter's, formative years. And so I didn't have a partner or a man in my world on the regular who was contributing financially. And so it's like, I just relish in men taking me out and treating me to things. And it's just like, I feel like filled with all this good energy when it really feels free and clear. And I was sharing this with this woman, and she was like, oh, wow, that is so not me. I'm totally opposite. I actually cringe when a man wants to pay for something for me, or like I'm like the opposite. Like I need to show that I can, oh no, I'll go halves, or I'll pay the bill, or, and so she thought it was really the way I was relating to it. And I thought it was really odd the way she was relating to it.
Can I tell you a funny thing?
Sure.
Well, a funny thing that affects all this is there are anthropologists who believe that our ancestors lived in separate groups of men and women and children and got together on the full moon when all the women were ovulating, and the men brought food and the women provided sex.
I just heard this somewhere.
Yeah, and I don't know, maybe in an interview, but what I've noticed is that women tend to have this instinctive response that if he buys me food, I'm supposed to have sex with him. So if I don't want to have sex with him, I got to pay for my own because it cancels.
You just nailed it.
Yeah, it cancels the obligation. And that's what I mean by transaction. That like and this is where entitlement shows up, that we'll take what we think we deserve and have earned because the taking of it creates no obligation because we already paid for it with whatever we did. Whereas when someone's giving us something that we don't think we earned, that's now going to create an obligation. And if we don't like the currency of that obligation, like I'm going to owe you sex or I'm going to owe you a favor, I'm going to have to take you out next time and the places you pick are too damn expensive. Right?
Oh my gosh. Okay, this is so good. And okay, so I have two more things that I want to cover here in the last 3 minutes of our conversation. So
okay, can I interrupt you 1 second?
Yeah.
You must be very powerful because my hard stop postponed for 10 minutes.
Yes! Awesome! They were like, oh, she needs a little more time. Thank you, universe. All right.
Yeah, good job.
Awesome. Okay, cool. So we've got a few more minutes here. Okay, so one of the things that came up when you were speaking earlier is pheromones. So like there's so much that can be created these days in this online virtual world. I mean, people are literally falling in love and having full-blown years-long relationships without ever even meeting each other. And something for me that's so important, because I am extremely sensitive to scent and smell. And there's someone who's been in my world recently who's super sweet, totally single, into me, all the things that I'm looking for. And his pheromones, like his scent, is not something that I want to nuzzle into and drink up. And that for me is a deal breaker, right? Because I can't fake the funk.
That's hilarious. So, I can't fake the funk. Okay, I'm going to ask you a question.
Okay.
So you said it isn't something you want to nuzzle into and drink up, but is it repellent?
Well, it's certainly not like I want to be in it constantly, right? So
okay, but I mean, if you think of repellent, neutral, gotta have it.
I would say it's between neutral and repellent.
Ah, okay. Do you think it's anything you could do something about?
I'm not sure.
The reason why I'm asking is because anything about a man that makes us want him all the time is usually going to turn us into a ninny. We're going to end up stupid. We're going to end up contorting ourselves. That thing I said about I was really good at adapting and contorting, it's because I always went after men that I had sexual attraction for, that I had high chemistry for, and that just made it natural to become whatever they would find appealing, no matter how little interest I had in being that for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
And I mean, and women are good at that. And when my daughter's so cute, she's like, Mom, I met a man and a guy, should say, yeah, I met a guy and he's really cute, but don't worry, the chemistry's not too bad because I could totally be myself with him. And how I know that is because I told him blank, like something she'd normally want to conceal. And so chemistry, I married a chemical husband and we had a chemical baby, and chemistry's right. We made a beautiful baby together, but it creates a lot of misery. And so anybody who how they smell makes you want to drink them up, I would say run.
Wow. Okay.
Now you certainly, repellent's not good, but maybe there's something that it's not really a pheromone, it's his own natural pheromone plus the soap he uses that isn't a good combo.
Okay. This is very interesting. You're totally, my brain is like, okay.
No, no, no.
You're messing with my fantasies, Alison Armstrong.
I know. What I like to say is we're crap heads. We're crap heads for chemistry, and we only want to be with whoever's pushing our favorite drug. And I can always tell, like, when a woman's like, so how was your date? Like, oh, he was really sweet. He was kind. He really got me. I really like him. Are you going to see him again? No.
I know I've got this one guy who has been texting me on and off for 4 or 5 months and still hasn't asked me out. And the other day he said, hopefully I'll see you soon, or and I responded, hopefully, question mark, like, and it spurred this whole next conversation, but it was like, wow, okay, it's just so interesting, the dance of like,
yes,
and is somebody who's like in the hopefully conversation, is that somebody that I would want to engage with? He could be the Mr. Man for the next period of time,
So I just have to ask you a question, and this is the hard part. So we want this man who's going to be all strong and take charge, right? Well, the more he cares about you, the more hesitant he's going to be. So, I mean, my husband fell in love with me at first sight. Like, no kidding, looked into my eyes and saw a whole different universe. And I knew it. Like, I passed him in the hall and I thought, this man loves me. And did he do anything about it? No.
What?
No.
What is up with that?
Well, the more they care, the more is at risk. And anything they think they're going to lose at, instinct says, don't bother wasting your energy on it. You're just going to die. And so it wasn't until I left him a message, I was thinking about you. And I think we should be really good friends or something. If you think so too, call me anytime, no time limit. Here's our number.
Wow.
He told me when he got that message, he made that sign they do with their arms where they're like, yes. Right? Yeah. We're talking about our grandkids on our first date. He seriously, I mean, it's story after story after story, but the more they care about you, the more they're not going to want to do anything that would keep you from being in their life at all. Because being in their lives as unrequited love when they really think you're special is better than what little access they have by scaring you off by wanting more than you would ever want to give.
Well, and, I'm interested because, and there is one more thing I want to ask you about, or just address. I know, I'm really drilling this in today, Alison. We may have to do a part 2. But anyways, is the whole thing about chasing. Men like the hunt. They like to pursue. And I've always been, or largely been, an aggressor in relationships where I'm the one reaching out. And that's part of who I be in the world. I'm a connector. I love connecting with people. And when I feel a connection with someone, I reach out, or I want to reach out. And so I've been working on like taming that part of me, because people keep telling me, you have to let men do the work. You have to let them chase. They get bored if they don't have to chase. So what about all of that big story?
Okay, this is the deal. If you're chasing a man, all he can do is run or submit. Those are his only 2 choices. He cannot generate. You're taking up all the space of generation. They'd have to like kick you out of the driver's seat, and they're not going to do that because they avoid conflict by nature. So if you like a man, you have to do the equivalent of, if you asked me, I'd say yes. And so energetically, you're not hunting them. Energetically, you're saying, if you want to chase me, I won't run too fast.
Okay.
And then it leaves it in their camp, right? It's like, I just left that message for Greg. If he hadn't called me back, I wouldn't have done something except for maybe like check through channels to see, does anybody know if he got my message? Right?
Okay.
But it's it's all about energy, which, by the way, is why we team up with horses to teach women how to communicate with men in partnership, because they're all about energy. And if you're chasing him down, which, by the way, chemistry is aptly named, when you have a chemical response to a man, it's testosterone and epinephrine. So that puts you in hunt him down mode. And it's why when we have too much chemistry for a man, we can't be receptive. We can't let him generate.
Mm.
And you can drag a man into a relationship, but what are you going to complain about?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? That you have to do everything, you have to plan everything, you asked him to marry you. Like it starts at the very beginning.
Okay.
And go ahead.
Okay, so this just in I think it kind of relates to this what we're talking about right now, but there's a part of the book where Claudia talks about her belly fat. And this is we're talking about the Queen's
Okay.
Code, and it struck something in me because I'll be very vulnerable here where I have struggled in loving my belly through the years. I had an eating disorder when I was a teenager, and although I began eating again and I eat very well, the mental, emotional part has come in and out since then. And so at times I really struggle with my belly. And I was speaking to a friend I know through the West African dance community last night, and he was like, "Do you have a lover?" And I was like, "No, not like a consistent lover, you know?" And he's like, "Well, you know," and then Claudia refers to her belly fat in associate or connected to her being too masculine in her meetings with Karen and Kimberly. And we're referencing the Queen's Code here. So I'm just curious about that whole thing. I know I'm like opening up a can of worms here probably when we have to jump off, but any final thoughts on those topics?
Okay. Oh boy. What order do I do this? All right. So stress, right? Stress and carbohydrates will, especially processed grains and sugar, will create belly fat. And women really have, we have a whole culture now where you're not supposed to have belly fat. We're allowed to have butts now, but we're supposed to have a flat stomach and a butt. But it's all baloney. And one of my favorite questions asked men is, what's your favorite curve on a woman's body? And right up there in the top 5 things they say is the curve of her belly and the poochie part of the belly. And yeah. And after Greg and I were intimate in our relationship, I said, I need to introduce you to somebody. And he's like, who? And I said, my belly. And I like pushed out my belly, like kissing my belly.
Oh my gosh.
I'm self-conscious about my belly. I need you to meet my belly. Right. Like it just like, and so he's always been really knows I'm, sensitive about my belly. But it is a favorite part of a woman's body to men. They want to kiss your belly, and not because it's flat, because it's abundant, because it's soft and curvy, and it's a way that women literally embody abundance. All our curves they're not utilitarian; they're abundant. And
I love that. I love that.
I mean, I was getting out of bed the other day. I said, okay, my body needs to be vertical now. And Greg goes, oh, goody. And I'll get to see the horizontal parts. And I started laughing. Like, that's what distinguishes a woman. When she's vertical, she's also horizontal.
I love that.
Yeah. And so every man has a different type. And the assumption of our culture about type is so off. And one of my favorite students, what she would do, she dated online and she'd meet these men for dinner. And early on in the dinner, she would just stand up and go, okay, does this work for you or not? And she would literally turn circles and let them check out her entire body because she knew it wasn't personal. It was their imprint. And the man that she married was a man who her body drove him wild. Like, oh my gosh, this is the most beautiful body I've ever seen. And So there's a lot we got to get over, it, including that every woman has a woman's body type that they think is beautiful, and very few women are their own body type. And so we think our body isn't beautiful because it's not our type. And I should have that body. That body's beautiful. And we, are afraid our man's looking at her all the time because we would. Okay, can I say one last thing?
Yes, please.
It cracked me up just then when you were talking about Claudia and her belly and the Queen's Code, because honest to goodness, that book was like it was like watching a movie and typing as fast as I could, which Keys to the Kingdom was the same way, the prequel. And when I read the book, I laugh, I cry. There are so many things in that book that I have no recollection being in there. And when you were talking about that part, I don't know what part you're talking about.
Wow.
Yeah, and it's just the magical nature of that book. I was in service to its existence. And it was a cool thing to
God
do.
for that.
Yeah. And I love you for loving it. And the table?
Yeah.
So the table showed up in Keys of the Kingdom, the prequel. And they just kept talking about how special this table was. But I didn't know what the table looked like until the morning I woke up and realized that Kimberly was going to see the table today. And could they please show it to me first? And then all of a sudden I saw the table and burst into tears.
Oh my gosh. Oh, Alison, thank you so much. This has been a really powerful conversation. Ignite Intimacy community, you heard it here. Alison, where can people find you online?
Understandmen.com.
That's easy. And then do you also have Queen's Code, or is all of your books and programs available at understandmen.com?
That's the easiest place to go. They can get to the ebook of the Queen's Code from there. We're actually out of print because we're changing the cover of the Queen's Code book, but you can get it at lulu.com. But if they just start there, and then the online workshop version is called Understanding Men. That's the name of the course.
Okay.
And it's well worth doing both. People who love one love the other. They're very different ways to learn something.
Amazing. Well, we will have all of those links in the show notes. You've heard it here, Ignite Intimacy community. Alison Armstrong, understandmen.com. Check out the Queen's Code and her other offerings. Alison, you are a gift to humanity. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And one day I will meet you in person and kiss your feet, woman.
Well, my cheek could be fine.
Oh, all right. Well, listen, if you have any questions, comments, please holler at us. hello@igniteintimacy.com. Share this with your friends. Hop over to iTunes, leave us a rating and review. And Alison, again, thank you so much for joining us today.
You're welcome. Bye, Laura.
All right. Take care, everyone.
Thanks for tuning in to another conversation on the Ignite Intimacy podcast hotline. We love that you choose to spend your time with us. Check us out at igniteintimacy.com. Subscribe to us on iTunes and leave us a review and a rating. It helps more people know about us. We love to hear from you. You can email us with questions, comments, or suggestions to hello@igniteintimacy.com. And tell your friends. Music was arranged by Jason Pfaff and Mike Corey, and this podcast is produced by yours truly, Laura Aisha. Thanks again, and we'll see you on the next one. In the meantime, let your light shine bright and ignite your intimacy.